Welcome to the Indie Game Academy, everybody. Many of you probably know who we are by this point. Indie Game Academy is an online school for game developers. We do our best to make game development education really fun, and we are all about, our mission is to help people pave their own path through this crazy industry. So whatever you want to do, we want to be there to help you. Paper prototyping, as those who know us better know, is one of our favorite subjects for various reasons. We have been, I personally have been using paper prototyping for a little over 10 years now in my professional career. And I didn't really realize what an incredible freaking tool it is until pretty recently. And part of the reason that I discovered or realized that it was such a special tool, hello, welcome from Sacramento, Emily, is from teaching all of you and just realizing how much fun people have with this and how much they then use it in their own practices. So we have 3 core agreements that we always ask of our students in all of our classes. I'm going to start here to make sure we are on the same page. Those core agreements are pretty straightforward. I'm pretty certain that all of you can handle it. Number 1, let's keep this space fun. This is a gamified online school. We are developing video games. Why the heck would we not enjoy ourselves while we're learning how to do so? Number 2, let's celebrate as much as possible. Can I get some bumps in the air? Yeah, yes. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Who's that? Thank you, Yassine. Thank you, Jefferson. Absolutely. Celebration and high emotion in general actually helps us remember things better, which is really interesting. We tend to remember those things that have high emotional impact on us. So we celebrate because it's fun and it makes our classes more engaging, but it also literally helps us learn better. And then number 3, let's be kind and patient with each other, please. Remember that culture is very much a mirror. If you're good to other people, they'll be good back to you. If you're a jerk to other people, they'll be a jerk back to you. If everybody in your life seems like a jerk, perhaps that says something about you. So let's try to be kind and patient with each other here tonight. Just have a fun time. All right, we're going to go through a couple of different things tonight. Here is our actual agenda for the workshop. Number 1, we're going to talk about why we prototype in the first place. This is a highly interactive class, so I'm going to be asking you questions. Please feel free to pipe up and talk at any moment. You can ask questions at any time, including this moment right now, if you wish. You can unmute yourself, jump in and just ask the question. Let's say, how many people do we have in here? We got 10 people in the room. So that's a small enough class that we can totally just chat if we have something that we want to talk about. So please feel free to jump in and just ask. Keep yourself muted when you are not asking questions, but please don't hesitate to ask. After we I've got another person waiting, hold on. After we talk about why we prototype, I'm going to give you a little bit on what I recommend you do before you actually commit to prototyping. Then, of course, we're going to talk about paper prototyping in general. We'll do some examples. We'll actually play some games together. And then all of you will be building your own paper prototype tonight. Yes, I want to see many video games. And then the best part of this class is towards the end when we just play each other's games and get goofy with it. So, why we prototype? Let's start there. Somebody in the class, unmute yourself and tell me what a prototype actually is. What is this term, prototype? What is a prototype?
It's a very short version of a game, just fun enough for people to play around.
Yeah, nice. I would say that is pretty much on the dot. A prototype is a simplified version of a concept with just enough information for us to test a hypothesis. Basically, we go, could this concept be fun? Let's prototype it. And then we build just enough to test that hypothesis. Why do we prototype? Why bother? It takes time, right? So why do we spend the effort to prototype?
Well, so you don't finish losing 10 days on your life, then realizing it's not even fun. And you just scratch every chat throws.
Honestly, 10 days is generous. I have worked on games that take me years, and so have many of other developers. So basically, we prototype so that we don't spend 4 years building something that sucks, so that we can confirm that the game is actually fun before we commit the time to building it. So a novice in game dev, I have now worked with well over 2,000 people on how to build games, introducing people to building games. So I've seen a lot of amateurs, and I love amateurs because they're learning and growing and they're excited, but there's a lot of mistakes that people who are just getting started run into. And one of those mistakes is this tendency to just kind of choose the first game that sounds cool and then build that. And there's good things about that, and I'll talk about that, but there's a lot of bad things about that. A game dev god or goddess or anybody in between instead chooses a game based upon agreed upon objectives and an actual established vetting process. So they don't just go, that game could be cool. They go, that game could be cool. Let me make sure it's actually cool. This increases your chances of success, whatever success actually means for the current game, the current team, etc. Hi, Kylie. This will run about 2 hours long. The core content of the class is about an hour, and then we're going to build a game. We're going to all build some games, and then we're all going to play some games. So if you're just looking to get the juicy stuff, the first hour will do ya, but I strongly recommend you all stay around for the whole time. So this is John Rose. He is one of the associate technical directors at EA now. He's worked at a number of different games throughout his career. He was one of my original mentors. And is the one who introduced me to paper prototyping. And he says that we prototype to test our ideas because no concept plays the way we think it will. How many people went, dang, this game is so cool, and then we brought it in front of somebody and had them play the game, and they did something that we did not expect at all? Has anybody had this happen? Yes. Thank you, Mark. Yes. Everybody. Anybody who is actually... Yes, thank you, Shruti. Anybody who has actually done playtesting has had this experience. You just can't guarantee how a player will actually engage with your game until you are actually playing the game with that person. So why do we prototype according to John? These are some of John's slides from times he has come and taught our classes. We prototype because we could build anything. We could build any game we wanted. We could go slap together a Harvest Moon inspired MMORPG. That's totally a valid option for us to build. But design, implementation, and testing are expensive. For those who have worked professionally, you probably already know how often as designers and developers, we're just negotiating what we actually are going to build. Because one person doesn't have the bandwidth to make you animations or whatever. And so you have to figure out how to make a fight without animations. Games are also only understood when played because they are vastly complex systems. So ultimately what it all boils down to is that we prototype for risk mitigation. We prototype because we could easily spend years building this game, and we want to make sure it's actually fun and that players want it before we dedicate that time to doing it. So before you actually prototype a game, there's a couple of things I recommend you do. I would love to hear from all of you, though, before I tell you, how do you choose what game you work on? Who's working on a game right now? Anybody? I see Jefferson. I see Yassine. I see Kyle. Kyle, tell me how you chose the game that you're working on right now. You can either type it out. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Yeah. So it kind of started with just us randomizing some free game ideas.
Nice.
And at the end, we chose a fourth idea, which ended to be a Lovecraft theme, and we just decided to go with that. Initially, it was supposed to be just like a basic survival, like you survive the Cthulhu, like a tentacle that comes against you. But then after that, the idea didn't work too well, so we started developing further and further until now we're in the stage where it now became a action wave survival type of game.
Nice.
That still keeps to the theme of what I call aspects, but the gameplay genre we had in mind is different.
Awesome. That is honestly a better answer than I often get. Well done, Kyle. Well done to Kyle and your team. So Kyle very much iterated towards a version of what they initially thought might be fun until they found the good stuff. That's a pretty strong process, actually. That's one that I recommend. Iterative design or iteration is such a huge part of game development in general. Jefferson, don't think I don't see that cat. I love cats. Don't worry. This is the concept validation funnel, which is something that a tool that I recommend you use before you even commit to a prototype. You'll notice that prototyping is actually the fourth step on this funnel. It's a little ways down. So the concept funnel, for short, is basically a way that we take a bunch of ideas, anything that we could work on, literally infinite things we could work on, and distill it down to just the one we wind up choosing, either for a full game concept or a feature that we're trying to fill in for an existing game. During the concept validation funnel, we have these 5 steps, and I'm going to run through those first 4 relatively quickly here to give you some idea of how we approach choosing a concept before we even decide to prototype it or not. So the first step that we go through in the concept funnel is what we call the define step, where we take the big infinite, the true infinite number of games we could make, and we reduce it down to a little box, our problem space. In the define step, we state our objectives and our constraints. And oftentimes, especially when you're on a team, this is where you're really like negotiating with the rest of the team. So leadership, a lot of the time, or the product managers, or whoever is running the boat, probably has some very specific things that they want out of this game or this feature. Those are our objectives, and not all of our infinite games we could build are going to fulfill those objectives, right? In addition, we have constraints. Like I mentioned earlier, maybe we don't have anybody to animate this game. Like we just simply don't have animators. How are we going to handle how are we going to handle building a game without an animator? That is a constraint. And that happens like all the time, especially when you are working on an existing game. There's going to be so many moments where one person or another doesn't have the capacity to build what you want to build. So how do you solve that? How do you come up with something else that can still solve the objectives given the constraints? So in Define, we come up with those objectives and constraints. And this is actually a really powerful tool for creativity in general. How many of you have done game jams before? Nice. I see you, Yassine. Jefferson, disappointed. By the way, some of you came in after. Here at IGA, we love to see your faces. If you're comfortable turning on your camera, please do. Please keep yourself muted, but you're welcome to jump in and answer any of my questions or ask your own questions at any moment. But unless you are talking, please keep yourself muted just so we don't hear the background. All right, game jams are a phenomenal way to increase your game dev skills. If you haven't done one, I recommend it. But the reason I bring it up is because game jams often have very specific constraints for what game you build. Number one, just you only have like 48 hours or maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. But number two, often they have some theming and that kind of thing, maybe team members. So it's really interesting how often completely unique, really exciting designs come out of the constraints of a game jam. So our box, our constraints are actually a really powerful boon and advantage to creativity. That's why we focus on objectives and constraints. Once we define our problem space, we go on to ideate what games or solutions we could build for that space. This is basically brainstorming, but ideate sounds better. So brainstorm a couple of concepts that could fill this problem space that would solve the objectives that the team wants and would solve them given the constraints that we have. We generally will brainstorm alone first. These are just some brainstorming tips for you. And then we'll come together to brainstorm together. We'll do both divergent and convergent brainstorming, which means many ideas versus just a few ideas. And we will time box those brainstorming sessions as much as we can. Next, once we have ideated, once we have brainstormed, we're going to filter these ideas, because if we have like 20 or 50 game concepts, that is way too many to prototype. So how can we get down to just our top 5, maybe our top 10? This is where we do filtering. Filtering is a term that I sort of came up with / sort of learned. But basically all it means is any exercise to eliminate weak game concepts that can be done in a brief period and does not require code. So if you have a bunch of game ideas, how do you slash a bunch of them until you just have those top good ones? Now, this is an exercise called a filter list that I use a lot, that I recommend to everybody, and is one thing I'll give you here from this lecture tonight. So a filter list in its simplest form is basically just like a scoring doc, or a decision matrix is another term I've heard used for it. All you're going to do is take all your game concepts. You're going to decide on a couple of filters, or the most important things about this game. So usually your objectives and your constraints are somehow here in this in these filters. In this case, we have scope, which is how hard it is to build this thing. We have viability, which is, do we think it'll get purchased? Do we think players will want it? And we have personal excitement. Are we excited to build it? And then we just score each of these things. I like to score 1 through 6 because I'm weird, and that means that there's no perfect middle. It has to be a little bit positive at a 4 or a little bit negative at a 3. And then 1 through 10 just feels like too many options. So I don't know, I like 1 through 6. But now after we have scored all of our game concepts, we can see that hypothetically our best concept has bubbled to the top. And so now we have a better idea of what to prototype. This, interestingly, is an actual filter list that my personal indie studio, my sort of passion studio called the Delve Bros, we published Tale More, which is a scan and play dungeon crawling board game. This is the actual filter list we used to decide on working on that game. It is far more advanced than what I just showed you. It has a couple of different levers and filters, and those filters have their own weight. So we're saying that our personal excitement is worth 4 times as much as the replayability of this game. And then each of the 3 founders, which is myself and 2 others, scored the games separately. And then all of those scores were combined and various differences were called out. So this is mostly just to show you how complex you can get with a simple tool to get a general idea of how strong a concept is. I will point out, though, that the game that we chose is this one. And you can see if you look at this rank column, it is ranked 15 out of about 30 ideas. It is exactly middle of the pack. We still decided to build it because the prototype went so well, because we really just loved the idea, we prototyped it, and players loved it. So this is not a perfect tool. It's just one tool for you to filter your game concepts until you know just a couple that you want to build. All right, so we have filtered it. Now, finally, we're here at the good stuff. Let's prototype. So prototyping is the 4th step in our concept funnel. It is an immensely powerful tool. And honestly, it is a tool that gets skipped a lot in and of itself. A lot of people just don't bother prototyping. I will tell you right now, please prototype. I don't care who you are, how advanced you are. Until you sit down and play with a real person, you won't know the entirety of your design. Most newbies just skip prototyping altogether, but I find that experienced devs have their own problems. Oftentimes, they just jump into programming like right away because they know how to do it pretty quickly, and so they figure they can prototype pretty quickly as a result. But remember that your only objective with prototyping is to ascertain whether or not this game could be fun and whether or not there's magic in this concept. So any extra bells and whistles, adding bosses to your prototype or adding animations to your prototype is essentially unnecessary unless that's a core part of what you're testing. Is this animation really important to our game? Is this boss really important to our game? So any extra bells and whistles are a waste of time. And potentially can take a lot of time. A good solid digital prototype can easily take 2 weeks, which if you've got 5 or 6 people working on it, AAAs can literally be millions of dollars. At smaller companies, it could still be tens of thousands pretty easily, and that's a lot for a little indie studio. So basically, you got to be careful about wasting time when you prototype, and that is where paper prototyping comes in. So before I tell you, what do y'all think a paper prototype is? What is a paper prototype? Somebody pipe up, unmute yourself and tell me.
Paper prototype is just making a game without breaking your head trying to figure out the code and the bugs.
Yeah, pretty much. I love it. I will often use the term codeless prototype like as a synonym for paper prototype. Technically, when we say paper prototype, it literally means on paper. This term comes from the tabletop design world. So this is where this is from when we were designing games on the table, when we made Monopoly or whatever else. These days, though, it is still a really valuable tool for video games and for testing video games. But oftentimes we wind up using various forms of codeless prototypes as a substitution. I think I saw a hand raised. Was that Shati? Shruti? Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that paper prototyping is kind of helps us to focus on the core gameplay instead of like the look and feel of the game, so that we get to what's really important before we decide everything else.
I love that. Yeah, that's actually one of the main advantages that I have found of it for it myself. In a paper prototype, actually, I will call it out when we get to this part, because this is a part of what I'm going to talk about in a second, Shruti. Thank you for the point, though. So a paper prototype is a playable version of your game. That is the core distinction. It's not a mock-up. It's not like a sketch of the game, because it needs to be playable. You need to be able to actually sit down with a real player and have them play the game. But what a lot of people don't realize is that you can play test so many, I would say like 80 to 90% of game concepts on paper. You'd think like if it was a little puzzle game or something, super easy to paper prototype, no problem. But like a first-person shooter or a platformer game in this example is a lot harder to paper prototype because, of course, there's actual moving elements in real time. But my big point from this talk, my main takeaway for you, is that you can paper prototype so much stuff that you wouldn't think you could, and you can still get away, you can still leave with some legitimate, valuable knowledge and data from your playtests as a result. So this is a paper prototype. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about a paper prototype. I don't know who these people are. It's some YouTube video from some school I found ages ago, and it's a really strong example. So this is a puzzle platformer game that the designer, I would assume, is one of the people in the room, probably the person holding the camera. And it's a multiplayer game, and so multiple people have been given a character who can move up and down this platform, can activate switches, can collect items, and can actually play the game. So you are getting a real playtest with probably what, 20 minutes or 30 minutes of prep time, slapping together some pieces of paper. So I'm going to show you a couple of other examples so that you really get the point. I, like I said, learned this from my time at Lumosity. Lumosity is a brain training game company. They make small mini games that work on different parts of your brain to help you basically not get old. And it was my first industry job. And this is where I was introduced to paper prototyping. So this is a bunch of mock-ups, actual sketches of a game concept that the science team tasked me with figuring out. The science team said, hey, we want a sequencing game. That's what they told me, a sequencing game. We want the player to practice creating sequences. So I drew up a bunch of stuff. I wasn't quite sure how to handle it. And then I turned it into an actual playable paper prototype where the player is trying to decide what color will come out of this sequence of conditional statements. So if I put a red in the top, where does it actually wind up on the bottom? Now, this prototype kind of sucked and nobody understood it. And I kind of don't remember how you're even supposed to play. So eventually, after a couple of different paper prototypes, we settled on a much simpler concept, which was simply number sequencing. And then I spent the next couple of months building them Fuse Clues, which is their number sequencing game and the only of their kind on their platform. So this is a very, very simple game that is actually far simpler than the original design because it's what worked better for the players, but still hit that objective of allowing them to practice sequencing, right? So this is a great example from from an actual active studio of how you might go through an ideation process that included paper prototyping. Now, because I am not the smartest man in the world, I have my own holes. And so for the past year, I've been interviewing a lot of designers who use paper prototyping. And one of the coolest people I ran into was Mike Saul from Escape Academy. He's one of the original founders of Escape Academy. For those who don't know, this is a virtual escape room game. And he gave me so many wonderful paper prototypes. You'll notice, by the way, that this is in Photoshop. So this is a digital paper prototype, or maybe a digital codeless prototype, which is confusing. But like I said, when I say paper prototype, all I really mean is a playable prototype with no code. So they created an actual playable game that can be manipulated by the game designer while the player plays. So if the player flips a switch, the game designer can show them where the water actually goes. This is a classic pipe filling game for those who've played BioShock or any other of the 15,000 games that have a pipe sequencing game. Then this became a fully playable version, a fully playable puzzle in their game. And this is their process. Anytime they need to create a new puzzle, they'll make it on paper, they'll play it together, they'll decide what needs to change, and then they'll actually build it digitally. So a paper prototype ultimately is just a test meant to reveal something about the game. It's meant to prove or disprove the viability of the concept. Viability meaning, does somebody tell me what viability means in the context of game design? What does viability mean in the context of game design?
If the idea is worth doing?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. If the idea can hit the objectives that we have for this feature, is this going to be a fun puzzle? And if it can fit within our constraints. So is this going to be a fun puzzle that Jordan can build on his own or whatever? It involves no coding, and that's the big differentiation. You can do it without code. The tester acts as the game engine, and it's meant to allow rapid iteration. A good paper prototype has testable elements, basically specific questions we're trying to answer. So does the player understand these are switches? Does the player understand how to move water through the switches? Does the player understand what a drain does, etc.? Specific testable elements, questions we're trying to answer. It focuses on player feedback and it seeks to answer a lot of those fundamental questions. So is this within scope? Is it actually fun? Could it hit our objectives? The pros, the reasons to use a paper prototype, the good stuff about a paper prototype is, number one, it's extremely fast. You can put together a paper prototype and have somebody playing it within half an hour, and we're going to do that immediately after this lecture. It requires you to simplify your game to its base elements, which is one of those more unexpected advantages. Because you have to simplify it, you actually wind up in a great design flow where you're really thinking through the entire system. And almost all team members can make them. So, the artist who hasn't had the chance to do game design before can actually put one of these together and then bring it to the design team and be like, hey, this seems kind of fun. What do you think about this? Prototypes also tend to look rough, paper prototypes, which gets honest feedback. That's another unexpected one. When you have real graphics in the game already, people will criticize the real graphics, even though we all know that's not important unless it's the graphical test. That's why we do things like gray boxing. So it's almost like a paper version of gray boxing. And they're just fun. I love paper prototypes. They're so cool. So this is Mike Saul, the guy I was talking about before. He's the co-founder and lead designer at Coin Crew Games, the people who made Escape Academy. And he has this quote from his interview that I thought was good here. There's something interesting about the freedom that a paper prototype has to improvise. We can change the game as we play, often leading us to designs that we never would have imagined. This is one of those big strengths that a digital prototype literally can't deliver. If I'm digitally prototyping and I'm watching my player play and the player gets confused by something, damn, guess we got to change that and go on to the next playtest tomorrow. If we're doing that same playtest on a paper prototype and the player runs into something that is confusing, you can go, here, let me just mark that. All right, we're good, keep going. You can immediately improvise, you can immediately adapt, and that actually winds up leading to designs that you never would have expected. The cons, the bad stuff of paper prototypes, the reasons not to use it, is that number one, it's just not very representative of what the final game is going to be like. Because it's on paper, the character's moving stuff around, the player is going to be able to do stuff that they can't possibly do digitally. Some concepts are just challenging to translate into paper form. I'm going to literally run you through one tonight that most people think is impossible, because I want I want to prove to you that you can do almost all games with this, but it's definitely more challenging than just building the dang thing. It cannot be played without the game creator, which is a real consideration. So with a digital prototype, I can send it to 500 people and get feedback from 500 people. With a paper prototype, I pretty much have to be present at every single playtest. And then assuming the concept performs well, oftentimes the next step is to make a digital prototype anyway. So it's sort of a mixed bag. It can be valuable, but sometimes it's not. So this is a tool to be used. It is not the perfect golden thing that'll be perfect for every situation, but it's a great way to prototype your games in a very quick way that gives you some general ideas. All right, this is a slide from a YouTube channel, a YouTube video that I watched ages ago that I liked. I'm extremely biased, and hopefully I'm not going to hurt anybody's feelings. But remember that not all areas of game development sit at the same level. Instead, remember that game design is essentially the skeleton of your game. I am not saying, I want to say this very clearly, that art or story or code or music are less important. If your art looks like crap, even if your game is super fun, a lot of people won't ever play it, right? However, your game design is your skeleton. No matter how beautiful your art is, if your gameplay is garbage, nobody's gonna play. Has anybody ever played a really beautiful game that plays like garbage? I know I have. There's a couple. People are thinking. No, that's good. So remember, in a game, in a paper prototype, that you are the game engine. This is an adorable clip from Reddit that I found ages ago, and I use all the time when talking about paper prototyping now. So this is a paper prototype of Tetris, and I think it's really actually a great example of what a Tetris paper prototype would look like. So this would be the game designer. This is you, everybody. Hello, that's you. And this is your game player down here. Hello. The game designer has come up with a set of rules and a way for the player to play. So they have these little 3D blocks they can actually drop in, and they can simulate Tetris, right? And the player can actually play. But the reason I like this clip is because there's actually a lot of the problems with paper prototyping being showcased here. Number one, this is not true random. This is not fully representative of the actual game. So the dad is grabbing whatever pieces he wants to grab, which means it's not going to be the same experience as an actually random system. There's also features missing. Those pieces don't disappear when a line gets finished, which is like a core part of Tetris that we are unable to test on paper. So yes, we can test this game, but we're missing core elements. This is a way for us to test the game. Yes, it's a way for us to prove that this game could be fun, but it's not a fully representative test. Also, I just love this post. All right. This is Rod Humble. He was the general manager for Sims 3 and Sims 4, and I interviewed him about paper prototyping, and he had another interesting point to pull out here. He said, a paper prototype requires you to attend every interaction. It's a strength to have these things in your head and to be forced to act them out for your player. So because you have to be the game engine, you understand your design deeper. So a great example use case for you, I worked for IMView for a time, IMVU, and we were working on a little metaverse for young women and those who identify as women. And the whole idea was that we were going to try to help people make friends online. That was like the core hypothesis of this game. And one of the ways that we did that was through virtual escape rooms, much like Escape Academy. A great example of how paper prototyping got used, like IRL in a real setting, was my bosses there. And if anybody has worked professionally, you've heard this story too. My bosses there were very micromanagey, and they had very specific ideas of what they liked and what they wanted in our game. So what I wound up doing, my process wound up becoming, I would throw together 3 paper prototypes of what I thought the next escape room should be. I would sit down with them and they would actually be able to play. It's a paper prototype. And then they'd pick their favorite, and then we're good. I can move on and actually build it. So instead of arguing for hours and trying to conceptualize this and wasting a bunch of time digitally prototyping, they got an approval to me within a day or two, just from some paper prototypes. And then we could move on and actually build the thing. So let's actually showcase a couple of paper prototypes that I've used in the past. I think at this point, everybody probably gets it. This is what I'd call like sort of easy mode of paper prototyping. This is a puzzle game I came up with ages ago that has some core problems that will never be solved, so I'll never actually build it, but I've always thought it's kind of cool. And the idea is it's almost like a match 3 where you are mixing colors. So you can mix any 2 adjacent squares. So let's say we mix the green one with the blue one, and once they connect, they will actually mix colors. So this square would then become cyan. And you get points according to how similar the colors are. And the pieces fall if there's nothing underneath them. So the idea being you're trying to mix a bunch of colors until you have a bunch of very similar colors at the bottom of the screen. Then you get a big combo at the end of the level. This is a real paper prototype I put together actually years ago to try this thing out. It seemed fun. I made it digitally. It was not a good game. The big problem that I kept running into was that it was very, very difficult to get a human being and a computer to agree on how similar 2 colors are. Never would have expected that to be a problem. That's a great example, though, of something that could not possibly be paper prototyped. So that's one example for you. The next one is from Tailmore again. This is the dungeon crawling app-enabled board game that we produced. And this is the actual paper prototype from our combat. Has anybody played Slay the Spire or other deck building combat games? Oh, that makes me sad. Everybody go play Slay the Spire, indie classic. The idea here, the hypothesis here was team-based Slay the Spire is going to be really fun. So this is a deck building turn-based game where instead of comboing off of your own deck, so you're putting together a bunch of cool cards to make some cool combo happen, you're comboing off of your ally's deck. So your ally plays one card, you play another card, and your 2 cards interact in a cool way to make something cool happen. So this is an actual playable game. It had some instructions, super beautiful, high fidelity, as you can see, random assets I found on Google, but enough that I can actually sit down and play the game with a player. So I acted as the rogue and wizard, which would be 2 other players, and I would have them act as the barbarian and tell me what they would do. And then the turn would resolve, some damage would get done, and then we'd move on to the second turn. So this allowed me to test the combat and we basically were like, yes, I believe it's fun. It seems fun. And then we moved on to actually build it digitally. So as you can see, a big part of how I at least have used paper prototyping is just to kind of confirm the gut check. I think this is fun. Let me just make sure. Okay, it is fun. Let's build it now. All right. So, when should we? I'm curious your thoughts before I tell you mine. When should we use paper versus digital prototypes? What is the appropriate time to use a paper prototype?
I
I
think.
believe. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
You can both go. Let's go with Yassine first.
Well, I think we need to paper prototype first, then go digital.
Yeah.
Because paper, you need like people to be in real life, and most of the time you will not be.
Yeah. This
Maybe
is
you
what
work outside the country or something like that.
totally right. That is what I would call a filtering step. Once again, it's a filter for us to eliminate a weak concept before we commit to a stronger concept. We paper prototype first because it's nice and fast and easy. We go, this kind of sucks. I'm going to throw it out and work on this one instead. Jefferson, what about you? What do you think? When should we paper versus digital prototype?
Yeah, so I was about to comment on your last example. So
Oh, okay.
we would make the digital prototype when, let's say, our teammates is not locally available.
Nice.
So the only option is digital.
Yeah. By the way, this is maybe not clear because of the language I've been using. When I say a digital prototype, I mean code. When I say a paper prototype, I mean no code. So when do we not code versus coding? Igor, you want to tell me?
I was thinking about that. Probably we should try paper prototypes when the game idea we want to do is easily translatable into that format.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. If there's at least a component, a core part of the hypothesis that you can translate to paper, then you can go for it. I'm going to show you an example in just a second of one that you wouldn't think could translate, but actually still works decently well. So there's a lot of good reasons, but the four that I've sort of collected from those interviews I've done and from my own experience, or the five, excuse me, are these five. So the first one is as a quick gut check. Like I said, when you go, I think this could be fun. I'm not sure. Let me try. It's so good for that because a digital prototype just takes too long to do a sort of gut check like that. Include everyone. So there is latent, untapped design potential on your team. If you are the game designer, all of the people that you work with, even if they aren't game designers, probably have a lot of great ideas. And so giving them the power, teaching them to do this, I love that. Every time I go to a new company, I teach everybody how to paper prototype and they love it. It's the best because then they can come up with their own games and they can send them to me for me to try out and consider. So including everyone. As a filtering step, that was Yassine's example, very, very true. Digital prototypes actually coding something can take a lot of time. So let's just make sure this is fun first, actually as a first step. If we have like 5 games we might work on, we could paper prototype each one of them pretty easily, and then just digitally prototype our favorite 1 or 2. And designing together is another great use of this because it naturally changes, because we can actually change the game as we play. It's kind of awesome to sit down in a room with a couple designers and just all paper prototype together and be like, what if we did this? What if we did that? Almost like a round table. And then finally is the example I gave from ImView, which is enticing leadership. When you have stubborn leadership, which happens all the freaking time, showing them a paper prototype and actually having them play, spending 30 minutes with you to play the game, can really get them to give you a yes or a no, or a new direction. Anybody know what playtesting is? I assume probably you do, but somebody tell me. All right, Yassine, I've seen you a lot. Somebody who hasn't spoken. Magnus or Michael or Emily? One of you want to tell me what playtesting is? I don't know which of you have a mic.
Yeah, I can give it a shot.
Nice. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah. So playtesting is when you have an organized event of people who are testing the components of your game, like the mechanics, and overall giving their opinion on whatever aspect of the digital prototype or that you're trying to test.
Yeah, that's pretty much right. A playtest is just a user test, if you've ever heard that term before. But in the game world, we're sitting down with a real person. Generally, the designer is in the room or watching the playtest, and that person is just playing the game. There's a couple considerations that if we have time, I'll tell you about a bit. But for the most part, it's just a chance for you to sit down with a real person and have them play your game. Playtesting is literally, not exaggerating, like the one secret thing that you can do to make your games amazing. At Lumosity, they set me up with the right behavior, which is that every 2 weeks we would playtest with 3 or 4 people. And those were always new people, always people that we hadn't known before. So one thing that you can incorporate into your own process right now is to playtest on a regular basis. Set yourself up with a weekly playtest or a bi-monthly playtest and consistently do that. So the biggest questions to answer while you are playtesting are to find the fun. Could this be fun? To find the magic moments or the golden nuggets. Basically, what are those special little saucy moments that are awesome and that you can expand upon and put everywhere in your game? And then what are the risks? What could sink this concept? Is this concept? What are the bad parts of this concept? So I'm going to run a playtest right now, and I'm not going to tell you what it is until we get in there. Who would like to playtest our mystery paper prototype?
Yes.
Yes. Was that Michael?
I'll give it a shot.
Nice. All right. So, Michael, we have a hypothesis at brand new, amazing indie game studio. Oh, Michael, what's up, dude? I didn't even realize it was that Michael. Hey, man.
It's me, I'm the stash Mike.
Hello, Mike the Stash. Mike recorded all of our business and marketing videos from our last course. It was awesome. So we're in brand new, incredible indie game studio, and we have this brilliant hypothesis. We think that a first-person shooter game, which you wouldn't think you could paper prototype, in which we have an ally, another character that we can control, would be awesome. We think that would be really fun and that players will love it. And a first-person shooter game with a controllable ally similar to Republic Commando or Gears of War will create a dynamic gameplay and a player connection with that ally. So, Michael, you, sir, are a secret agent guy in super amazing FPS game prototype. And you have been tasked with rescuing the President of the United States. Or somebody that you care about. Doesn't have to be that.
Both, I guess.
Yeah, sure. You've been tasked with rescuing somebody very near and dear to you. And you, in order to help you on this dangerous mission, have been tasked with the new guy. And their name is Lieutenant Pierce. They are very green. You are the yellow circle down here in the bottom left, and you've just landed with Lieutenant Pierce, which is the green guy, the green circle there. At any moment, you can tell me verbally that you want to do one of these 5 actions. You can examine, interact, talk, move, or shoot. You can also command Lieutenant Pierce to do one of these 4 actions: go to, interact, shoot, or talk. All right? So you must rescue the President. Here's our health. Here's our gun. For some reason, you only brought 5 bullets. Big mistake. Forgetful. What would you like to do?
You know, I think as an intern, Lieutenant Pierce might be a little expendable. So I think I'm going to tell Lieutenant Pierce to go to that area.
Okay.
Direct.
Go through the door?
Yeah.
All right, great. So Lieutenant Pierce walks through the doorway. He's like, I don't know about this. Successfully walks through. Nothing seems to happen, but there is an enemy standing in the corner staring at this box. Luckily, Lieutenant Pierce was quiet enough that they have not turned around yet. What do you do?
Well, I think Lieutenant Pierce knows that's an enemy. It's a pretty red enemy, so I'm gonna tell Lieutenant Pierce to just kind of shoot him.
All right. Lieutenant Pierce pulls out their gun, and they're noticeably shaky. This is their first confirmed kill, and they start shooting. They miss the first couple of rounds. They're not as practiced as you. The enemy turns around, is like, what the? And starts shooting back, turns into a cluster truck. Lieutenant Pierce does manage to take out the bad guy, but takes a couple bullets. Wow, that's crazy, man. Whew. What now?
Wow. Well, I think after all that hullabaloo, I'm going to move into the room.
Okay.
and I am going to interact with the box.
All right. You open up the box and there's a key inside. Wow.
Amazing. I'm going to tell the lieutenant to take a break and interact with the trash pile.
All right. Lieutenant Pierce interacts with the trash pile and makes a bunch of noise. There's like broken bottles in there. And he goes, "Oh, I'm glad we took out that guard. We probably would have alerted him if we tried this first."
Oh, interesting intuition there, Lieutenant Pierce. I think I'm going to, I guess, interact with the key if it's not in my inventory, and then move to the door and interact with the lock.
All right. You use the key on the lock. It successfully unlocks the door. You can now move into this hallway.
All right, I'm going to look back at Lieutenant Pierce and say, this is how a real professional does it. And I'm just going to walk through the door and hope for the best.
All right. Lieutenant Pierce has like crazy advanced chat GPT responses. So he goes, "Okay, boss."
And it is a hallway.
Indeed. There's nothing of note except another door on the other side.
All right, I'm going to talk to Pierce and say, "Come here, friend."
All right, Lieutenant Pierce says, "All right," and walks up behind you, still shaking, bleeding a little bit, but alive.
All right, I'll tell Lieutenant Pierce, see how easy that was? Now you try it with this door into this room.
All right. So Lieutenant Pierce says, "All right, I got it." Wipes the sweat off of his face, kicks in the door, and immediately behind it are two guards with assault rifles pointed at Lieutenant Pierce. You've entered a quick time moment. You can still interact, but you have 5 seconds to decide what to do. 4, 3,
I'm going to shoot the
2.
enemies.
All right, you open fire. Lieutenant Pierce, being in front of you, takes a couple bullets.
Oh no!
But you two are pro. Well, you are a pro, and take out the bad guys. We'll say you use just 2 bullets. You are just such a pro.
I just ricocheted. I curved the bullet, as they say.
All
Right.
What next?
This room's kind of boring. There's not much in it, so I think I am going to move to the tiny storage closet-ish area across.
Okay. It's just an open archway. There's a hallway off to the right with a door at the end, and then a door right in front of you now.
All right, I'm gonna call in Lieutenant Pierce and tell him to watch my 6 as I enter this next room.
All right. Lieutenant Pierce looks down at his watch and says, "I got you."
Oh no. Yeah, I'm going to go into that room directly in front of me.
All right. You open up the door, and ta-da! Your patented character that you care about a lot, who's maybe or maybe not the President of the United States, is sitting there wrapped up in rope and has a gag and is going, "Roo, roo."
All right, I'm going to examine the United States of the president and see if there's any sort of booby traps or any sort of injuries, or they're just kind of in a rough spot and can't talk.
Okay. You take the gag out of his mouth. You look around first a bit. Nothing seems off when the gag comes out. It sure does seem like patented hostage character. Nothing seems wrong.
Okay, well, I'm not one for platinuming or getting all the collectibles, so I'm just going to ignore those boxes, and I'm going to help this hostage on her way to the helicopter.
All right, you put your gun down, start to untie the knots, and then suddenly, Evil Guy McGee pops out of one of the boxes with an assault rifle and just starts spraying the room. The game fades to black. Congratulations, you finished the paper prototype of Super Amazing FPS.
I'm happy and sad. It's very conflicting.
Indeed. Awesome. All right, so that first of all was a little example of playtesting with a paper prototype. You saw there that I acted as the game engine. There were a couple of things that were predetermined. The level was already there, the weapons were already there, the enemies were already there, but there's also some stuff that I had to improvise as we went, much like I saw somebody mention it. Jefferson said, "I'm loving the RPG gameplay, much like role-playing." Paper prototyping is basically role-playing. So I would love to hear from all of you before I give you my thoughts. What did we learn from this? obviously this is not representative of the final game. It's a first-person shooter. We're actually going to be walking behind our gun in the first person and actually, looking around the room and pointing Lieutenant Pierce where to go. But we did get to playtest it. So what did we learn from this playtest? What are some of the takeaways? The list of things you want to answer this paper prototype with first. That is a great point, Mariana. Mariana says, I would want to know if you have a list of things that you're trying to answer. That means you've been paying attention, Mariana. You get a gold star. Yes, I should already have the things that I'm trying to answer ready. But I'm asking all of you to see what we could have learned from this playtest. So what are some of the learnings? What are some of the things we now know about our game? Thank you, Michael, for the gold star. Awesome. What are some of the things that we now know about our game after this playtest? Igor.
If player learns that Lieutenant Pierce is useless, he can just ignore him for the rest of the game and do everything himself.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, our core hypothesis was that Lieutenant Pierce would be like a game changer. Like that would be the new amazing part of the game. I'm curious, part of our hypothesis was feeling a connection to the ally. So Michael, did you feel any connection to Lieutenant Pierce?
I felt a connection to him as much as like a gas station attendant or something. Just like, you have something that I need, but once I got it, I'm out.
Nice. So that answers a couple things. Number one, we're currently failing at our hypothesis. So that might mean that we need to iterate more. Maybe we need like an intro cutscene where Lieutenant Pierce like delivered your baby or something. But at least as it stands, our current prototype, Lieutenant Pierce is a failure. Who cares? Lieutenant Pierce is like some comic relief, and that's kind of it. Anything else? What did we learn from this game, from this prototype, that we can apply to our actual first-person shooter to make our first-person shooter better? Igor, is your hand still? Do you have something else, or is the hand old? Okay, great.
No, sorry.
No problem. Any other thoughts? Jefferson says Lieutenant Pierce was a nice bullet magnet. Yes. And maybe the comedic relief is actually enough. And that bullet magnet part of it is actually enough. Maybe Lieutenant Pierce is actually invulnerable. Maybe that's our solution to this thing. And so it actually helps to like send Lieutenant Pierce into horrible situations. And we're making a much more comedically aimed first-person shooter. But if we were making like a gritty Call of Duty clone, I would say Lieutenant Pierce is probably currently a failure. Maybe we just cut him out and don't have him in the game. Anything else we learned from this? Big one that I'm surprised nobody has mentioned yet is level design. You can 100% design levels and learn things about your levels. For instance, this is really interesting. To fit a little bit more in this prototype, I shortened this hallway. And before this hallway was like this. And 9 out of 10 people that I playtested this with went down first. But Michael, you are now the second person in a row after I shortened the hallway to go straight through the door first. So why didn't you go down?
I don't know. I'm just kind of like a rigid person. I'm like, as soon as I see like kind of like an end goal, which is like a door there, I just kind of want to finish the linearity of that level and then kind of go around and see what's next from there. So nice. I felt pretty comfortable going to the door instead of the hallway going down.
This, by the way, is why it's important to play test with many people and not just one, because perhaps the only answer is that Michael would have always kicked the door in first. But it definitely does maybe beg the question, like, is such a small change like that actually going to cause the player to change their behavior? And we could easily test that by doing another couple playtests. So level design is a huge thing. Absolutely, for any game you're going to build, you can paper prototype level design without having to commit to a digital prototype. Any other things that we learned from this prototype?
Just came out in my head that probably if we build the digital version first, we would not add the interaction like interact with the trash pile or kick the door. It just came out naturally from his head, and I believe it's a great addition for the comedic side.
Well said. Yeah. That right there, I would say, is maybe the biggest strength of a digital prototype, or excuse me, of a paper prototype. A digital prototype is extremely rigid. When we build it, that's what the player plays. And that's good in its own way. A paper prototype, however, causes us to ad-lib and improvise and kind of like, I don't know, what does the player want to do? And then learn that information. So we now, thanks to Michael, have some inclinations about how Lieutenant Pierce might be used that would actually be fun. Like maybe we do make a game where Lieutenant Pierce is just a bullet sponge, and maybe that would be hilarious. We should keep testing. You know, that's something that we wouldn't have learned from a digital prototype, or at least probably wouldn't. Awesome. All right, we're going to move on. So there you go. You can paper prototype pretty much anything. That's a first-person shooter game. Obviously not representative of the final game, but it still gives you great information. So we are going to now make a paper prototype. We're 1 hour in. It's time for all of you to make a paper prototype. I'm going to give you, not 30 minutes, that's way too long, about 15 minutes to create your paper prototype, given a specific theme, which I'm going to tell you in just a second. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes in each of those concept funnel moments. And that's mostly just to cement the lesson. So we're going to define for a moment, then we're going to ideate for a moment, then we're going to filter for a moment, and then I'm going to give you that 15 minutes to actually build a prototype. We'll then spend the rest of class, about 30 or 40 minutes, playing each other's games. That's like the best part. So a couple of words on making a paper prototype for anyone who might still be confused. If you're not exactly sure where to start, the place to begin is the core loop. So what is the interaction that the player is actually doing in this game? And how do I convert that to paper form? Remember that the biggest thing here is that it is actually playable. So whatever you build in the next 15 or so minutes, you need to be able to play with a person in this room. You just got an example of me playing with a person just via auditory input. Michael just told me what he wanted to do. And that's probably the easiest way for you to do it. But you can do it a couple of other ways. You can create a document that you share with the player so that they can actually move elements around. You can use programs like Figma, or there's another one that's very similar to Figma, whose name I always forget, that actually allows you to do some very simple scripting. So you could add like keyboard input. Figma's great despite that. You can do it on paper. Actually on paper with dice and construction paper. That's the most fun and is where this originated. It's just that, you know, most of our playtesters are not within arm's reach anymore. And if you do it on paper, you can still play with people over video screen. Usually you're just going to like point the camera at the game and then ask them what to do or roll the dice for them, that kind of thing. And you can, the thing that I use the most often, as you saw here, is actually just Google Slides or Google Pictures. Because it's like just enough for me to kind of get the test going. And like I said, the paper prototype doesn't need to be high fidelity. So if you're unsure where to start with the core loop. If anybody, by the way, has trouble coming up with a game concept to make, what I would recommend you do is to build an escape room. You got 2 examples tonight of companies that have used paper prototyping to build escape rooms because it's really straightforward. You can do things like having a key hidden in a box, and then you could like, you know, write a little quiz here or a little riddle, like what has 2 arms or whatever, and then have them actually answer that question. And when they answer it, you can open the box or whatever. So if you're uncertain what to make, I still want you to do a prototype because that'll get you practicing. So if you're uncertain of what to make an escape room. All right. Does anybody have questions on how to paper prototype or what we're about to do or anything else before we actually get started? Kyle actually brings up a good point. I glossed over core loop like it was something that everybody should know. Somebody explain to us what I mean when I say a core game loop.
Well, it's something that repeats itself every time you start a game.
Yeah, let's do this. What is the core game loop for Stardew Valley? What's the core loop?
I think it's
Harvest.
Igor, why don't you tell me?
I believe it's plant, grow, sell, plant again.
There you go. Plant, grow, sell, plant again. That's a loop. We just do it over and over and over again, and somehow we find that really enjoyable. What is the core loop of? What else could we do? How about Angry Birds? What's the core game loop of Angry Birds? Oh God, it's not even a video game anymore. Core game loop of Angry Birds. Somebody tell me.
Shooting birds, destroying structure, and redo it again.
Yep. Pull back bird, let go, observe destruction, pull back bird again. So our core loop is simply the actions we perform over and over again that distill everything down to the barest fundamentals. I was listening to a great podcast, the Game Design Roundtable is one of my favorite game design podcasts. And they were talking about simulation versus video game. A simulation is actually trying to simulate something like a flight simulator or something like that. We think some of the time that a game should be a simulation, that it should be realistic. If we're going to make a blacksmithing game, you know, they got to get the temperature right or whatever. But oftentimes in games, we actually distill the real world happenings down to far simpler gameplay because that's what's actually fun. It's not really fun to like hold the sword in the furnace to the exact right temperature, but it is probably fun to just like beat on a piece of metal until it's a sword, right? So a lot of what we do as game designers is taking how the real world works and making it simpler, just breaking it down to this tiny core loop: plant, grow, sell, right? Awesome. Oh, Emily, I didn't see that you mentioned something about Stardew. You mentioned exploring the town and completing tasks. That's actually, loops can be very confusing. Let me see if I can find a good example. Hopefully something horrible doesn't pop up. Game loops. Uh-oh, game loops. Yes, this is just the image I was thinking of. In general, you're going to have a lot of different game loops. So you're going to have your core one, you're going to have a meta loop where you're upgrading, you're going to have like a house loop where you're working on your house. There's a bunch of different loops that all intermingle and commingle when you're actually designing the loops of your game. So the loop that you just mentioned, exploring, would be its own loop. Mariana asks, how would a game loop be for an escape room game? That's a great question. Somebody want to tell me for an escape room? What would the loop be?
Find clues, solve puzzle, escape.
Yeah, probably like search room, find clue, solve puzzle, something like that. Do you know what the name of the podcast episode was? Yes, probably. It is the Game Design Roundtable. It's the most recent episode. I love to go to the gym and listen to them. It is episode 301, Design and Controls with, it's scrolling very slowly, with Richard Lee Markand. All right, so let us begin. Any other questions actually before we start? Does everybody have either a program that they're going to make their prototype in or some paper that you're going to make the prototype on? Everybody have the materials they need?
Well, I could make any paper, but it's hard to show you.
Yeah, as long as generally people can play the paper prototypes. I'm trying to see if I have any good examples anywhere. Here's some napkins. So as long as you can kind of set yourself up where people here can see the game and you can have them act it out. So you could say like, you know, here's your board. You're going to have to move to the other end. You can roll a die to see how many spaces you move. As long as you can kind of do that, you can do it on paper and still test via video call.
Like this, maybe?
Yeah, that works fine. You probably have to turn off your blur, but that'll be the only thing.
Yeah.
All right. If not, let's crowdsource some of this. What are some programs that we could use to build a paper prototype? We could use Adobe Photoshop. We could use Google Pictures. We can use Figma. Anybody else have any good ones for this kind of sort of just graphical layout? There's plenty of them. Miro. Yes, actually, I've used a good amount of Miro. That's the one I was trying to remember. Miro is another really good one. Roll20. Actually, interestingly, the guys at Coin Crew Games that I was mentioning use Roll20 all the time to paper prototype, which I would not have imagined. Canva is a good one. Notion's not bad. Yes, Adobe, all of the Adobe products, although they're way too expensive. Awesome. So you have many options now. All right, so I'm going to announce your theme, and then we're going to move through the Game Dev 5, those 5 defined steps, the concept funnel together, and then you're going to make a prototype. So your theme is 1 minute or less. Your game must be playable within 1 minute. Your theme is 1 minute or less. You are about to build a paper prototype for a game, that can be played in 1 minute. So let's do the define step. Somebody tell me at least one constraint for this game.
Complete the task before 1 minute.
Yeah, there you go. Must be played within 1 minute. We just said that. Igor says, is stealing minutes allowed? Ooh, good idea. I'm going to let that slide. That sounds cool to me. What is one objective for this game?
Finish it on time.
Finish it on time, yeah. But I remember that these are largely like business objectives. So when I was working at InView, one of the things that they tasked me with was we had a bunch of people who were playing for like 4 hours one day and then never playing again. So one of the things they tasked me with was increasing unique days played. Basically, they wanted people to stop binging. And they wanted them to just play a couple minutes every day. So that's a great example of an objective. What's an objective for this game? And it can be one that you come up with yourself, by the way. This doesn't have to be something that I said or that I suggested.
I was thinking about something like a battle royale where you can play with other people.
Nice.
And your goal is to steal other people's time.
Interesting.
Like
I have not seen anybody paper prototype at Battle Royale yet. That's one of those ones that's going to be harder, but if you can make it happen, I'll be so proud of you. So that's a good one. The objective could be a satisfying Battle Royale, or maybe the objective here is just to learn how to paper prototype, or maybe the objective is to create a feeling of anxiety because we're running out of time. There's a lot of different objectives that we could have. All right, now let's ideate. Somebody give me some ideas. A game that can be played in 1 minute and that creates a feeling of anxiety. Let's say that's our objective. What are some ideas for that?
A cooking game.
Cooking game, nice. Don't want to burn it, only got 1 minute. How do we get it out to the customers in time? Whenever I do brainstorming, by the way, I always do a title, even if it's not final, and then a sentence or so description of how the game plays. So give me a title and then a sentence for your cooking game.
Yeah, to cook off, be the fastest chef in the kitchen.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cook off. I would include actual gameplay, so like mechanics, etc., in that sentence. So I would say like cook off. You only have 1 minute to complete a few mini games and finish your meal, something like that.
Cool.
All right, give me one or two others. Somebody else.
Survive.
Okay, tell me more.
That's it.
All right, I need a game title and I need one sentence about the gameplay.
Well, the game title is Survive.
Okay.
And the gameplay is stay alive from like attacks for 1 minute, where you can't attack, you can only protect.
Awesome. Okay, interesting. So survive. Survive for a minute as enemies attack you, where you can only defend. All right, give me one more. Somebody else. Let's ideate. One more.
I got one.
Okay.
Maybe it's like you have amnesia every 1 minute, and you want to figure out who is your person that you actually like love in the room, and to tell them that. And so you have to like use clues around you to figure out who actually is your person.
That's so cute. That's like exactly the kind of game I like working on. I don't know why. That's wonderful, Emily. What's the name? What's it called?
Oh gosh, I have no idea. Is My Love is the only thing I can think of that's so cheesy.
Is My Love? That's fine. These are not final game names. You can change this later.
That's
it's
good.
just so that you can talk about it together as designers. So we have Is My Love, we have Survive, and we have Cook Off. Those are our 3 games, all right? So now we need to filter. How do we cut out some of the weaker concepts from this? And please don't take it personally. We're just doing this for the exercise. How do we cut out at least 1, possibly 2 of those 3 concepts? How do we cut those out?
Well, we can cut on how simple it is.
Sure, yeah. So this is where maybe we would do the filter list, right? So we could put in Survive. We could put in, what did we call it? Cook Off. And we could call it Is My Love? Is that what it was, Emily?
Who's my love? Or maybe
love?
Love Clues. I don't know.
Love Clues. All right. So Survive, defense only survival game. Cook Off, finish your meal before time runs out. Find your true love before you forget. What is this? It's such a commentary on modern day dating. So those are our 3 games. We can very quickly cut out a couple of these simply by filter listing. So scope is how much effort it's going to take us to build this game. This doc is a bit confusing, but larger games that take too much effort to build are a 1. It's a bad scope. And games that are easier to make are a 6. So quickly, people just shout it out. First number I hear is what I'm going to add. What is the scope from 1 to 6, where 1 is way too big for survive? What's your best guess?
I think it's 1.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot to build in a big defense game. What about cook-off?
Like,
shout it out. No
3.
answers are wrong. Yeah, definitely easier to build. Probably we have a smaller area. We probably just need to build like a kitchen. What about love clues?
Oh wait, I thought it was the other way around. I think Cook-Off will be harder to build actually than Survive. But
Okay.
0.5.
I don't do halves. I'll give that a 1 then. Yeah, so this is an old document, and I actually don't use the term scope anymore. Instead, I use ease of building because that's like easier to comprehend what we're writing down. But either way, so we've judged this upon how hard we think it's going to build. So we think survive is going to be a little bit easier to make. So maybe we'll make it a 4, cook off a little bit harder. Love clues is kind of harder to conceptualize. So it's hard for me to know how much it's going to take for us to build it. I might give it like a 2 or a 3 for that reason. If you can't easily conceptualize it, it generally means it's going to take you more time to build it. Viability. So this is how likely we think an audience will love this thing. Could it actually make money? What do we think the viability of survive is, where 1 means no money and 6 means millionaires?
I guess Vampire Survivors proved that it's kind of valuable.
Yeah, it probably works, but here's my problem with it, is that I don't yet see a strong enough differentiation. A defense only sounds interesting, but I still don't quite know if an audience is going to want to play that. What about cook-off?
It's niche, I
Kind of
think.
been done a lot.
Yeah, it's been done a lot. No offense, we love you, Mark. But yes, it's been done a lot. What about
Maybe
love
it can
clues?
work. Yeah, that's straight 5.
Yeah, I actually think so. If we can figure out how to conceptualize it and how to put it together, that's pretty interesting. That's the kind of game that makes total sense for an indie. You hear it and you go, what the hell does that mean? I got to go try it. And then personal excitement.
And the concept is basically like an escape room, but like you have clues around, so maybe it's not too hard.
Maybe so if we're talking about conceptualizing it, this is why design roundtables are the best. Maybe it is an escape room, sort of like maybe heady, like maybe the theme is that it's inside your own mind or something. And then the final step, our loop, is that we finish by identifying which one of these people is our true love or something like that. And we have a nice simple loop we could put together. All right, personal excitement. How excited are we to build these games? 1, not excited. 6, it's our dream game. First number I hear is what I'm going to write for Survive. How excited are you to build Survive? Más rápido, let's go.
3.
3, all right. Cook off?
5.
5, very excited. Love clues. How excited are you?
6.
6! Whoo! All right, so this took way longer than I meant to, but this is a great example of using a filter list and how we can quickly compare game concepts. We pretty much already knew this, which is why filter listing is more useful when it's a little bit more, get out of the way. When it's a little bit more complicated, like this example I gave you earlier, this is actually combining multiple people's scores. It has a much more complicated weighting system. That's when you're going to start to get a little bit more value out of it. This is so simple that you probably already knew that love clues was the most interesting. But if you've got like 50 games to go through, or 50 versions of some feature you're going to build, this can be really valuable. So now we know probably love clues is the one we're going to build. And if we have time to make multiple prototypes, we'll probably prototype love clues and survive, but we can probably eliminate cook-off because it's just been done too many times before. So that's your filter step. We've now filtered it down to just 1 or 2 games and we're ready to actually prototype. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes. 20 seems to be too long. You have 15 minutes to build a paper prototype. For the next 15 minutes, I'm going to mostly shut up. I'm going to be here for questions, but you're just going to make some cool stuff. And if you have questions, you can ask, but otherwise, I'm not going to say anything. You can build this prototype on a digital program. You can use Miro or Photoshop or Google Pictures like we were talking about, or you can make it on paper. Remember that the huge distinction here is that your game has to be playable. So at the end of this, we're actually going to play these games with each other. So your game needs to be playable. It can't just be a drawing or a mock-up. There needs to be actual playable elements, a win state and a lose state. That's a great place to start. How do you win and how do you lose? All right. Anybody have any questions, or should I start the timer?
A question in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Can we choose our own idea? Oh, yes. I just went through these ones to give you an idea of how we pick a thing to prototype in the first place, but please build your own idea. Don't use one of the three that we just did. Unless you really want to, that's okay too. Sometimes it's fun to get a bunch of versions of the same game. Any other questions?
One more in the chat.
Any advice? Oh, sorry. Any advice for prototyping a story or choosing an adventure? Yeah, those are so easy. It's the best. Just grab a couple pictures from the internet, steal that shit. Just make sure you don't sell the pictures that you stole, and put them together in an interesting way and have a couple of choices for the player. I would recommend you have just one little story beat. So instead of trying to tell a whole story here in a minute, just have one moment, like maybe it's a fight with your partner. And you're trying to navigate the narrative choices there or something like that. But otherwise, those are really, really easy. So put together a couple of options and actually have them choose what they're going to do. Are there any templates to use? Mariana, that's a great question. And perhaps I will put some together in the future. But as of right now, no, I don't have a template for you. Is it okay if I prototype and send it over later? I need to drop off now. It is, Shruti. I will miss you very much. Shruti, if you wish, we have an event coming up this weekend that you can come and join us at if you'd like. You can use this code to get 50% off. But otherwise, thank you, Shruti, for being here. All right, any other questions?
Bye.
Heck yeah, you rule. All right, I'm starting my timer. You have 15 minutes. You can keep asking questions, but please make an incredible prototype that you can play in 1 minute or less. Bye, Paul, I miss you. Come to level 1 this weekend. All right, you have 15 minutes. Put on some music in the background. I'm not really going to talk unless somebody asks questions. And I will give you some updates on time as we go. Make sure your game is playable with a win and lose state. Do me one favor. When you come up with the game concept that you're going to prototype, write it in the chat for us, or even just speak it out loud, because that way it'll help inspire other people.
I actually just realized that the game team, it's actually, there is a game that's called I think 16 second less.
16 second place?
Yeah, it's like you have 16 seconds to like gather materials. Then you need to stay in a bunker for like for like days until rescue comes.
Is it 16 like this?
No, 60.
Oh, 60. My bad.
Ah.
Oh, I've actually seen this game, and it's depressing. Awesome. I love that though. A tip that I got from GDC this year that I've been talking about a lot. So some of you may have already heard me mention this, but the 90-10 rule. It's just a sort of paradigm shift for me when I think about designing games. I ran into it. I don't know if it was just kind of going around, but 3 or 4 different people mentioned it during GDC this year. And the 90-10 rule is simple. 90% of your design should be copied from somebody else. And then 10% should be your own innovation. Because players like that familiarity. They want the fresh twist. They want the game to be different. But largely, most of it, they want to be the same as other games that they've already played. You have 11 minutes left. I'm going to step away for just a moment, and I'll be right back. Do we have any amazing game concepts yet? We have 8 minutes left. 8 minutes for a playable version of your game.
My creativity is not kicking today, but I had one that I wanted to build, and I tried to find a game lab for it.
Okay.
Is dance to grow plants. So I'm thinking something that you could dance, so the plant will grow, but maybe if you dance to the wrong plant, the plant is going to eat you or something. So
Amazing.
the only thing I had in mind.
It is kind of interesting, like a farming game where you have 1 minute. I don't know what that looks like exactly, but that's an interesting place to start. Emily got attacked by snails. Interesting. Maybe make a game about that. You have 7 minutes left. If you're struggling, by the way, Escape rooms are a great place to start. You could also do a multi-choice adventure, little narrative game. Those are a great place to start. Anything you can take, if you're really lost, take any game concept. So a farming sim or a first-person shooter or what are some other ones? A match 3 game maybe, and make it on paper. Doesn't need to be a brilliant game idea. This can just be practice, right? But you have to be able to make it in a minute or less. Play it in a minute or less. Mark, are you talking to us? I keep seeing your mouth move.
No, thank you though for checking.
You're
It's like
good.
mumbling.
Got it. Mark, what are you gonna make?
I was trying to see if Google Slides will allow like someone to move objects at the same time. Cause I was gonna make like a snowman building contest with like two-player game.
That's
But I
cute.
don't know if it does. I don't know if it lets you.
You could have you can have people control your screen. If one of the things that I've done in the past is I have reduced a live action game to turn based if I have to, even though that is less representative of the final game. But so you could like give the player, you have 3 seconds to decide what to add to your snowman or whatever.
Got it. Thanks. All right.
Just asking, how much time is left?
30 seconds. Just kidding. You have 5 minutes and 30 seconds.
I think I'm done. I didn't even need paper.
Nice. What's the concept?
Well, it's basically the idea for game in well, I took the how did we call it? The love game, love in 1 minute. Love clues. Well, that's not much about clues in my game, but it's kind of a dating game for 2 players, where instead of rating like we do in Tinder, instead of rating on pictures, we rate on conversation that lasts for a minute. And after each sentence, another participant have to give a rating to either increase scores, like give like 1 score or 2, or distract score like 1 or 2. And if in the span of a minute they manage to both hit 10, they match. If no, they unmatch and never see each other again.
Intriguing. Okay. One of the people during one of these workshops came up with a mutant dating sim where you are the like love maker or whatever. What is it called? Matchmaker for a bunch of mutants in a post-apocalyptic world, and that was pretty hysterical. I'm getting some of those vibes from what you're talking about. You have under 4 minutes. See if you can get your game playable. We'll have like 15 or 20 minutes to play, so probably we'll have 2, maybe 3 people play their game with all of us live here, so that we have a couple examples of using the paper prototypes. You have 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left. Try to get your game to a playable state, a win and a lose, some way that you can play with another person in this room in 2 minutes. 2 minutes left. Oh, and I totally should have already said this. If you have already finished, Igor and anybody else, play your game with yourself right now and try to see if there's anything you can iterate on before you get it in front of another player. Un minuto, 1 minute. Ten seconds left. All right, and that is time. So I'm gonna, for like a minute, I'm gonna mention playtesting. We've already talked about it, but just to set you up to playtest, we're gonna have probably 2 people playtest their games right now in front of the audience so that we can give some feedback and get an idea of how they work. Playtesting is so important. Breaks you out of your biases as a player. I would say 100% of the time, I am wrong when I design things. It is a staple of being a designer. The people you playtest with are the people who you're building your game for. So if you're playtesting only with yourself, who are you building your game for? Only yourself. No one else will like it. So playtest with a wide range of people, especially those people who you expect to be your target audience for this game. A good playtest has specific questions you're trying to answer. You should be preparing these questions ahead of time. So I would like every person to write down at least one question that they would like answered about their game. And you should focus on player feedback as much as possible and leave that ego at the door. I wrote this on LinkedIn the other day and I loved it. Good game designers know that bad feedback is good feedback. When people hate your game, good. Now you know how to improve it, right? So leave that ego at the door. If somebody says your game is bad, thank you. Thank you for the time. Awesome. I'm gonna make it better now. Before your playtest, you should pick those questions, find somebody to play with, and of course, build a prototype. During the playtest, I want you to introduce yourself and then give just enough information for them to play. Ask them to think out loud. That is such a simple tool that I learned a long time ago and is so valuable. Please think out loud as you play for me. You'll get so much more information out of it. And then avoid distracting them. Once they start playing, basically shut up. If they ask you a question, oftentimes I just won't answer. If they're like, how do I do this? I'll go, how do you think you should do this? Or I'll go, I'm not going to answer that question. And I'll just let them struggle because that's valuable information, right? If you guide them too much, you are losing the information that you might learn from the playtest. And then post playtest, once you finish playtesting, have a little breakout session with them and ask them some questions. Start by asking the big questions first, the open-ended questions. What did you think? Did you like it? Did you have fun? And then ask more specific questions. What did you think of the boss? How did you like the menu? And then ask the most specific questions at the end. Did you notice the weak point was on the boss's ankles? The reason you do that is to try to unbias your player as much as possible. Because if they think they know what you want to hear, that is what they'll say. It is an ever-present problem for designers. So let's play test. We are going to have 2 or 3 of you play. Who is feeling brave and would like to show off their game? I'm going to pick on somebody. We know Igor has one. All right. You, Juan. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, you can
Awesome.
just say you.
You. All right, you. Would you like to share your screen? Or however you're going to share?
Oh, I think screen sharing is disabled.
Oh, my bad. 1 second. You can turn that back on. All participants. All right. You take it away. It's your playtest. How many players do you need?
Just one.
All right. Who wants to volunteer to be used playtester? Otherwise, I'm just going to call on somebody random. Emily, how are you feeling about playtesting? You want to try a game?
Sure. Thanks.
All right. So you take it away. Emily's your playtester.
All right, cool. So the game is called Loan Sharks, and the objective of the game is to you have 1 minute and you have to roam around your house and try to find some items that the loan sharks will agree to accept to pay off your loan of $500.
I love the premise. Okay.
All right, and then your actions are you can go through these hallways and you can inspect a room, and when you inspect a room, you can sort of uncover what is sort of inside that room.
Ooh.
So this is you're sort of starting at the entrance where the loan sharks are. You just heard the news. So yeah, that's the game. There's this first floor here, and then you can go upstairs to the second floor.
Okay.
So do you want to start a
Cool.
timer and have Emily start?
Sure, I can have a
I can
time.
also time for you if you want.
We'll try this.
All right.
All right, starting now.
Okay, and take me to the left. The first room to
To
the
the
left.
left?
The
Okay.
living room, yeah.
There we go.
And yeah, I don't know how you,
Oh, inspect it. You want to figure out what's in it?
yeah, I inspect it.
Okay, so we've got a sofa. There's a quarter in the sofa. Television stand. There's a television. Collection of old DVDs.
Okay, I think I want to sell the TV with the
TV?
DVD.
Okay, I don't have an inventory, but we can make one really quickly.
Oh, that's okay. All right, then take me upstairs. Yeah, I'm excited to find all the good stuff.
All right, let's go upstairs.
The loan sharks are beating on the door.
The first one with the workstation.
Okay, so room 1.
Ooh.
Got a bed, dresser, nightstand, workstation.
Computers and office chair for sure. iPhone and Kindle. I guess I'm selling it all. I won't be able to call anybody.
Is that time?
That's time.
That was a lot less time.
So how much money did Emily make?
Let's see. So, I mean, probably enough. The computer probably like 1,000 or something. I would imagine for a workstation. Yeah, I didn't really think through how much things would cost, but
That's okay.
all right.
That's a good note for the next playtest, though.
Right.
So fun.
So did Emily fail or succeed?
Yeah, we can say she succeeded.
Awesome.
Getting off the computer.
All right. So let's do a little mini feedback session. What questions do you have for Emily? How do you want to run the feedback session?
I think it's unguided feedback first. So like, what is your first impressions of the game? Was it enjoyable?
Yeah, I don't know why, but like the fear of like, oh man, you have to like do this quickly and loan sharks are after you. I was like, okay, go find all the expensive things and I'm gonna just sell everything. But I think like if there was something where like, oh, if there are certain things that are like important to you or that you like need in your life, then you shouldn't sell those. So then you have to like make more decisions along the way. I know for a 1 minute game it's too short, but like if it was a longer type game, I think that would be interesting to try to figure out like, oh, but I love watching TV, but then I have to like get rid of it, or I need to call somebody about a medical thing, but I have to sell my phone, or something like that. That would be interesting. I kind of actually envisioned this whole game as like this first part as like the beginning of like a big saga where you're like first chased by loan sharks and you have to sell a bunch of stuff, and then a bunch of other stuff happens. And I feel like that would be very interesting.
Right. Okay.
I just want to point out how much information you just got from a couple of boxes and literally 60 seconds of playing the game with somebody.
Yeah.
Like that was so much info that maybe you won't use. Learning when to listen to feedback is its own skill by itself. But so much of that was gold. I love that. I could definitely see this being a part of a saga. I almost see this as like maybe a part of a life sim, like The Sims. Like if you give away your TV, now your character's depressed or something. And I definitely see it as a part of a grander loop, a meta loop. Maybe the loan shark comes back every day, and so by the end of the game, you just have an empty house and you're just sad and it's terrible. I don't know. Any other questions for Emily?
No, I think she answered my main interest was like how palpable was the experience, but
Nice.
It sounds like it was good. So,
Anybody awesome? Does anybody else have thoughts on loan sharks? Ideas for the game? Anything else? Igor.
Yeah, I do. First, I think the idea is very interesting. And what came to my mind is perhaps for items that we collect, we can have a perceived value counter. But then after we search the house more, we learn, for example, that the ring we found before is actually fake. So as we thought that we have enough money to pay loan sharks, now we know that the ring is fake and it's not enough. And it puts more pressure on the player and he has to find something else. Something like that. And also perhaps they do not live alone. And before the game starts, they have a conversation with their with people they live with. And they have the items they hold dear to. So you have to try to not sell them. Because if you do, you get like a bad ending or something.
That's awesome. I really love that. I could see it being like a pressure washer simulator, like something like that. You're going to somebody else's house to pay off their loan sharks. So it's like not your home, it's somebody else's home. That's hysterical. And so they've given you information like, you know, my grandmother's ashes are in the diamond encrusted urn, but maybe you have to sell it. A piece of feedback I have is just, I think there needs to be greater autonomy of choice. The player needs to actually make decisions. Because as of right now, they basically just go, what's the most expensive thing and I'll sell it.
Right.
So I think a lot of what people are talking about here is how do we complicate that decision a little bit so the player actually has to think about it, and so that different gameplays might be different.
All right. Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Nice. Well done, you. That was really fun. I think it's a great little concept. And I could definitely seeing it be a sort of pressure washer scale game where you're like frantically trying to pay off the loan sharks. All right, let's give a round of applause for you. Very brave to be the first person to show off their game. All right, we've got time for, probably one more on the dot. Who would like to show off their game? Who wants to play test?
Maybe me.
All right. Yasin, how many players do you need?
2. And
All right.
Is there somehow a way that they can't communicate with themselves?
They can't communicate with like each other with 2 different players?
Yeah.
We could, like, you need them to, they could just take out their earplugs or something for a second. We could do breakout rooms, but I feel like that's too complicated for it now. Why don't you explain the game to us and then we'll figure out how to make it happen.
So it just robot battle things where you have 16 seconds. You choose your robot and you just play.
All right. Who wants to do robot battle? We need 2 players.
I'll do it.
All right.
I'll
Mark?
battle.
All right. Who wants to battle Mark? Who's feeling ambitious? What about Michael or Mariana? I see your faces, so I'm picking on you.
I'm hesitant, but I'll battle Mark.
All right.
Oh,
Michael v. Mark, the battle of the century. So Yasin, you want them to like make choices without being able to hear each other? Is that the idea?
No, they can hear each other because I was trying like every enemy has its own attacks.
Okay.
But I didn't have time, so just choose one.
Okay.
Maybe the coolest.
So Mark and Michael, choose your robots.
I think propeller guy's cool, so I'll pick
They're
propeller
the-
guy.
yeah,
Error X.
Good
This
choice. I'll
guy?
go.
No, the other side. Error X, the propeller man.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, RRX.
I'll go round boy on the left or right.
This one?
Gatling gun.
All right, we got X versus
Okay.
Gatling.
Just notch him down into the area battle. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to Robot Battle, the fight of the century.
Wow.
We have in the red side RRX,
oh,
Woo!
while the other side we have TX05.
Boo!
Each one has 60 minutes to decide which move they're gonna take. Are they gonna attack or defense? You can only attack 3 times or defense 3 times. So choose wisely.
All right.
So
So
that's where
what?
the secrecy comes in, I guess.
Yeah, what we could do, if you guys don't already know this, in the bottom right, wherever your chat is, you can decide who you're sending the message to. So you can click that little button that currently says everyone and change that to Yasin, and then you can tell Yasin what you want to do.
So who's gonna start so I can start the timer?
Which robot am I? Just so I can be clear. What's the name?
I think you choose the big boy, so it's
Yeah.
TX05,
All right, thank you.
this side.
Nice.
So I guess you're gonna start.
All right, TX05 is starting. So Mark, message what you would like to do. Or wait, can he just say it then? Doesn't matter if Michael hears?
No, it matters.
Oh, it does matter.
I
Times.
input my command.
All right.
Yeah, okay. So you wasted 2 seconds. The other side?
Yeah, so Mark,
I sent you one.
Mark and Michael both sent you what they want to do in the chat. If you look at
Okay, so Mike decide to defense while Mark decide to attack.
the chat. What happened?
Mark just wastes 1 of his precious attack ability. You
No
only have
effect,
2
okay.
attacks left, while the others have only 2 defense left.
Nice.
Let's go.
Round 2.
Round 2, begin.
You've got some real presence, Yasin. It's awesome.
I can almost hear the battle music, you know?
Da, 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 da.
It seems that our consensus has choose what they do.
What
So,
happened?
What? So Mike decides to attack while Mark try to defend.
What?
It seems that the side has
I've been bamboozled.
All right, let's do one more round because we're almost out of time here. One more round.
the final round, the round that will decide who's gonna win.
Round boy, round boy.
Ooh, I love you, Spiro.
This match was actually really fast since they think fast without hesitation, with only 55 seconds playing. So, what's TX05 gonna do and what's RRX gonna do? Are they gonna attack each other, defend each other? Who knows? So, they both decide to attack,
What?
which is something expected. So this is actually not gonna count to any of them. So you need to repeat.
We're coming to the end of time. I have something to immediately point out to you, Yassine. So there are
Yeah.
essentially 3 options of what could happen as far as the game is currently designed. Both could
Yeah.
attack, one can attack and one can defend, or both can defend. As far as I understand your design currently, all 3 of those things currently have nothing happen. Is that right?
Yeah, because if the other one attacks, yeah, just realizing there is no.
We're indestructible.
This is why we prototype our games. That's great, though. This is a good learning moment. I feel like immediate feedback for you is similar to what I said before, which is autonomy of choice. I feel like you've got to have a couple of moves. It can't just be attack and defend. And those moves have to have some kind of weight to them. So maybe they have a speed priority, but you can only use them once. Like you can use your fastest move one time or something like that. Or maybe they have attack and defense at the same time. So like this one defends you a little and does a lot of damage. Or something. Maybe you can do a Pokemon mechanic where you have fire and water attacks that hurt each other more or less. Either way, it seems like you need a little bit more choice.
Yeah, okay. I was actually planning on everyone has like a numbers of attack and the number of defense. So if you attack stronger, you beat the defense one.
Mm-hmm.
But I just realized that you could just choose the characters that are opposite to each other.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's awesome. Any feedback from the room? Sorry, finish your thought. Didn't mean to cut you off.
So there's a lot of things to do. Maybe a stage where you can win is gonna be the first thing to do.
That does sound like a good change. Any feedback from the room for Yassine?
I like the voiceover, like at the end when you're like, and so da da da, like that was really fun.
I was gonna mention the same thing. I feel like if nothing else, you proved that your game needs to be just like ridiculous with the crazy announcer, like Unreal Tournament 4 stuff, where they're like, "Oh, robot boy number 5 got his leg blown off, crazy!" You know, like that would just be a lot of fun. That seemed like it already worked, even though the game like couldn't be won. You know, we were still all laughing just because of your wonderful announcement.
Yeah, great environment, great world. I feel like I want to like. I feel like the characters are quirky. I want to scroll through all the robots options and like look at their their abilities and their quirkiness. So very cool.
Nice. Awesome. All right. Well done. Okay. So we're going to wrap up for the day. We are at the end of our workshop. I'm sorry, everybody. I know. What I like to do towards the end of every one of these things is just to ask the audience a couple of questions to help the lessons sink in a little bit further. So I'd love to hear from 1 or 2 people. What is your favorite takeaway from today?
I have one.
All right.
Yeah, so while trying to make the exercise and watching everyone doing and playing their games, I realized that how it's easier to have few ideas, try out with your family, your friends, whatever, and see if the game is a good idea or not. So this is the whole point of the exercise first, but I have not expecting that would be that much fun.
Awesome. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun. Like I said, when you're working professionally or on your own studios with your own friends and family, whoever you're building the game with, this is so much fun to do with them when you're deciding on different features. So when you're first deciding on the game, like a whole game, definitely, but you can use paper prototyping for small features as well. So what's something? I recently added crafting to the game that I'm working on. So I could have made a paper prototype for my crafting mechanics. In this case, I didn't because we already had a really easy to use digital system. But we could have. Anybody else? What is your favorite takeaway? Let's do one more. Igor.
Yeah, I think for paper prototypes, the time constraint mechanics better be made not in form of real time constraint, but a finite amount of points that we give to the players that they can spend, because well, just the form of it, like having actual time constraints, is a little bit cumbersome.
That's a great point. Yeah, I think to be clear for everybody here, if you're ever doing this for yourself, generally when I do a prototype, it's anywhere between 30 minutes and an hour, depending on the game. So these playtests that we just did were super fast. We just did that for the sake of time. but generally you're going to spend 30 minutes to an hour with your playtest, with your person. So it's a great point that, especially with how we did it here, it was just too fast for us to really like get down to the game and understand the game. So perhaps there's other ways that we can add urgency to the player besides a timer. What is a paper prototype you're going to make now? What is a game you want to paper prototype or something you might like to play with? Nice. I like that you don't think it's a crutch, Michael. Obviously, digital prototypes are dope in their own way, but everybody already thinks that. So I'm an advocate for the paper, you know? What's a game that you want to paper prototype?
I was doing a game here on the paper, but I was not able to finish. Basically, my whole idea is to you have 2 plants and you have to give whatever that plant is asking to you. So the first plant wants sparkling water.
Okay.
And the second one, I forgot, he wants some music. So you need to sing or dance, whatever. So I was thinking, okay, maybe this is an interesting idea to build or try out.
Yeah.
But by the end of the day, the thing that I enjoy the most is that I always had this kind of analysis paralysis of what can I build.
Yeah.
And now I know what I can do to find the answer.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. I sometimes, Michael was talking about worrying that paper prototyping was a crutch. I sometimes worry that playtesting is a crutch because I do so much playtesting. Like I worry I'm actually a terrible designer and I'm just getting ideas from other people. But it works. So, you know, go playtest with some people. Try it out. All right. So anybody have any last questions? I'm going to give you some homework and then we'll say goodbye. Any last questions about paper prototyping or anything else we talked about tonight?
Do we have more time for sharing or no?
Sure. You want to show off your game? We're not going to play test, but you could at least tell us what you wanted to do. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I was just curious about the love clues concept because I was like, how would I actually do this?
Yeah.
So, okay, basically, I got a person. We're at the bottom with, you know, our body, and then person A and person B, and we're trying to decide who was our actual love in real life.
Nice.
And then on the table, you have a paper, a pen, and a lamp, and then on the wall, there's a mirror.
Yeah.
These are the tools you can use. And so you go up to person A, and they're like, "Hey, I'm your true love. I have a marriage certificate. We were married for this many years, and here's a love letter you wrote to me," you know. And then person B has a wedding picture of you guys together and matching wedding rings. And then so you have to decide what to do. And I figured out that what you could do if you wanted to test person A, the love letter from you to them, you could write down those words and see if your handwriting matches the love letter, which it doesn't. And then for person B, you can try on the wedding ring and it is your size.
That's really cool. It's like maybe like Papers, Please or Phoenix Wright. Like it's almost like a discovery game, I guess. I don't know if there's a name for that, but I love that. That's great.
Yeah,
awesome.
And you could also look at yourself in the mirror to see what your face looks like.
Nice. Yes. That's awesome. All right. So my homework for all of you is a couple things. Number one, come and join our Discord if you aren't already in there. We are, so my name is Willem. I don't know how much of you know me already. I know many, at least a couple of you already do. I'm Willem. I run the Indie Game Academy, which is an online school for game devs. We run tons of events like this. If you come into the Discord, we have actually like 3 or 4 of these every single week. And that's because we incentivize our community to teach classes. So one of the things we do is we have people teach each other. When you have something cool you want to teach, we encourage you to do so. All of you can teach your own classes there if you'd like. So come and join the Discord. It's the first thing I'd love you to do. But to further the lessons from tonight, I would love you to play test your game with at least one other person in person. So I see, Emily, that you have at least one other person there with you. So maybe try that game with them and see what they think. And everybody else, try out your game with somebody else. Yassine, I want you to add a win and a fail state and then play that with somebody else and see how it goes. I want everybody to try that out. And then a bonus, if you would like, make another paper prototype, a completely different one, and playtest that with somebody. All right?